The air is cold enough to see your breath. You are standing in a stone courtyard in the middle of the night, somewhere in Jerusalem, pressed close to a pile of burning coals with strangers who Don and Apos know your name, and hope to God they never ask. Somewhere behind a wall a few feet away, a man you have followed for 3 years is being questioned by men who want him dead. And you followed him this far, close enough to warm your hands at the same fire as the people who arrested him, close enough to hear his voice through the stone, if the wind is right. You told him, hours earlier, that you would die before you denied him. You meant it when you said it. But here in Apos, that's what nobody tells you about that night, the part almost every retelling skips completely. Before any of this happened, before the soldiers, before the courtyard, before the fire, Jesus told Peter exactly how this would end. Not vaguely, not in quote, "You might struggle," end quote. He named the failure in advance, and then he named the exact sound that would mark it. Not a trumpet, not thunder, not the tearing of the temple curtain that would come the next day. A rooster. Stay with me, because this is where it gets strange, and then it gets remarkable. Of every possible signal Jesus could have chosen to mark the worst night of Peter and Apos' life, he picked the most ordinary sound in the ancient world. A sound so common that nobody in that courtyard would have looked up when they heard it. A sound farmers heard every single morning of their lives and never thought twice about. That was the choice. Not something rare. Not something dramatic. Something so plain that its very plainness is the point. This is not a story about a bird. This is not a story about bad luck. This is not a story about one weak man and Apos' worst night. This is a story about a sound God chose on purpose, and about why that sound, of all sounds, would follow Peter for the rest of his life. To understand why the rooster mattered, you have to go back a few hours earlier, to a room upstairs, where 13 men are finishing a meal none of them will ever forget. Jesus turns to Simon Peter and says something strange. He tells him that Satan has asked to sift the disciples, all of them, like wheat. The word he uses there is plural. It means all of them together. The whole group is about to be shaken. But then Jesus does something you might miss if you and Apos were not listening closely. He says he has prayed for Simon, not the group, him. The word shifts to singular, one prayer, aimed at one man, asking that his faith would not fail completely. And then Jesus adds something that only makes sense in hindsight. End quote. When you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. End quote. Not if. When. He is not predicting a maybe. He is predicting a fall he has already decided to forgive. Here in Apos, that's what most people miss about this moment. Jesus is not surprised by what Peter is about to do. He is not disappointed later because he misjudged him. He knew. He named it in advance, in that upper room, hours before the fire, hours before the questions, hours before the rooster. And when he does finally attach a signal to the failure, he doesn't and Apos reach for something poetic. The Greek word he uses is elector. It means, literally, a rooster, not a symbol, not a metaphor dressed up to sound spiritual. A bird, the most unremarkable, unimpressive creature you could possibly choose to mark the collapse of a man who had walked on water. But it gets stranger, because that ordinary sound wasn't Apos random. It was a fixed point on the clock. Jewish and Roman timekeeping in that era divided the night into 4 watches: evening, midnight, cockcrow, and dawn. You can see this exact structure in Mark and Apos' Gospel: evening, midnight, when the rooster crows, and daybreak. Cockcrow wasn't Apos, a loose phrase for some time before morning. It was a specific hour, a named watch, somewhere around midnight to 3 in the morning, the third quarter of the night, known and expected by everyone who kept time the way people in that world kept time. Which means when Jesus told Peter he would deny him before the rooster crowed, he wasn't Apos, making a vague prophecy that could be fulfilled by luck. He was naming an hour on a clock everyone in that room understood. And Mark and Apos' account of that entire night, betrayal, arrest, trial, denial, moves through those 4 watches in order, like a countdown nobody in the story can see except the one telling it in advance. So here in Apos, that's where we are. A sound this ordinary, a timeline this precise. And in a few minutes, we and Apos, we're going to look at a puzzle historians have argued over for decades, because some scholars say there and Apos' a problem with this story. A real one. If you and Apos never heard this part, you and Apos. We're going to want to see how it gets solved. Before we get there, if a video like this is worth your time, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me which detail in this story you never noticed before. Now, back to the courtyard. Here in Apos, that's the part nobody tells you. There in Apos, that's a real historical objection to this entire scene, and it comes from Jewish law itself. The Mishnah, the earliest written collection of rabbinic teaching, compiled generations after Jesus, but preserving much older tradition, records a ruling that raising roosters and hens inside Jerusalem was restricted, out of concern for ritual purity near sacred things. Scratching, pecking birds were considered a hazard close to holy offerings. So skeptics have asked a fair question for a long time. If roosters weren't and Apos, supposed to be kept inside the city, how did Peter hear one crowing in a courtyard near the temple? Pay attention to this, because the same body of Jewish law that raises the problem also answers it. That very same Mishnah records an actual case of a rooster being punished in Jerusalem for causing harm. Not a hypothetical bird. A specific legal case about a specific rooster inside the city the rule supposedly forbade them from. A restriction on paper is not the same as a rule nobody ever broke. And there in Apos, more. In 2015, archaeologists excavating at Mersha, a site south of Jerusalem, uncovered an enormous quantity of chicken bones, commercial scale, dated to the 4th through 2nd centuries before Christ. The evidence shows chickens were common, widely raised, and part of daily life across Judea in exactly this era. The purity ruling may have limited roosters near the temple itself, but it did not erase them from the region, and it likely didn't in Apos. Erased them from every courtyard in the city, especially in the homes of the wealthy and powerful. Homes like the high priest and Apos. Here in Apos, that's what most people miss. The very objection meant to embarrass the gospel writers ends up confirming how carefully they wrote. They didn't in Apos. Invent a detail that couldn't in Apos. Survive scrutiny. They recorded one that, when you dig into it, holds up. Now here in Apos, that's where the story gets hardest to watch. Peter is standing at the fire. The Greek word for it is anthrakia, a charcoal fire, a word so specific it appears only twice in the entire New Testament. This is the first time. A servant girl looks at him in the firelight. She says, and quote, "This man was with him," and quote, and panic, real, immediate panic, takes over. End quote. "Woman, I don and Apos, know him," end quote. Peter says. Denial number 1. About an hour later, someone else insists Peter was one of them. He denies it again. This time the denial has an edge to it, closer to an oath. Denial number 2. Then comes the third accusation, and it and Apos. That's the most dangerous one. A relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off in the garden a few hours earlier looks at him and says, end quote, "Didn't and Apos. I see you with him?" End quote. And Peter and Apos' accent gives him away, the flat vowels of a Galilean fisherman, unmistakable in a Jerusalem courtyard. This time Peter doesn't and Apos, just deny it. He curses and swears he doesn't and Apos, know the man. Think about that escalation. Denial, then an oath, then a curse. Each one louder than the last, each one more desperate, each one moving further from the truth. And Jesus once taught that anyone who wanted to follow him had to deny himself. The same word, the exact verb. Now Peter uses it, at a charcoal fire, in the opposite direction, denying not himself, but the one he claimed to follow, in order to save his own skin. And then the rooster crows. Luke tells us something the other gospel writers don and Apos. At that exact moment, the Lord turns and looks straight at Peter. The word is emblepo, not a glance, not a passing look, a direct, fixed gaze, the kind you cannot mistake for anything else. Jesus is inside, under guard, being questioned by men who want to kill him, and in the middle of that, he turns and finds Peter and Apos' eyes across the courtyard. He does not look away. He does not have to say a word. Peter cannot argue with a look the way he once argued with a prophecy. There is no debate to win here. There is only the sound still hanging in the air, and the eyes still fixed on his, and the sudden, crushing weight of every word he swore an hour ago at the table. Peter goes outside, and he weeps. Not quiet tears. Luke says bitterly, the kind of weeping that comes from somewhere you didn't and Apos, know you could break. Hold that thought, Because this is not where the story ends. Not even close. Weeks later, after the cross, after the empty tomb, after the resurrection nobody in that courtyard could have imagined, Peter goes back to the only thing he knows. Fishing. He and Apo's out on the water with a few of the others, and a stranger on the shore tells them to try the other side of the boat. The net fills so heavy they can barely haul it in. And Peter, the same man who once denied even knowing Jesus, dives into the water and swims for shore before the boat even lands. And on that shore, Jesus has already prepared a fire. The word is anthrakia again, the exact same rare word. The only 2 times it appears in the entire New Testament, and both times, Peter is standing at one. This is not a coincidence a careful writer misses. This is deliberate. Jesus recreates the scene, the smoke, the smell, the heat on his face, on purpose. He doesn't end Apos. He sit Peter down somewhere neutral to talk about what happened. He rebuilds the exact setting of Peter and Apos' worst failure, because the only way to heal a wound like that is to go back into the room where it happened. 3 times, Jesus asks him the same question. And quote, "Do you love me?" End quote. 3 questions. 3 answers. Matching, beat for beat, the 3 denials at the first fire. By the 3rd question, Peter is hurt, genuinely grieved, and he answers, and quote, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." End quote. Jesus does not lecture him. He does not bring up the courtyard. He does not make Peter relive the accent, the curse, the rooster. He simply says, and quote, "Feed my sheep," end quote. And then the same 2 words he used the very first day he called Peter away from his nets on the shore of Galilee. End quote. "Follow me," end quote. Here in Apos, that's the part that should stop you cold. Jesus didn't end Apos. He erased the memory of that first fire. He didn't end Apos. He need to. He built a second one, on purpose, in the same shape, and used it to turn the worst night of Peter and Apos' life into the start of everything that came after. Every time, for the rest of his life, Peter smelled charcoal smoke. He had 2 memories waiting for him. Not 1. 2. The failure, and the forgiveness built to match it, detail for detail. Think about the last thing you failed at badly enough to still feel it in your chest. Now imagine the person you failed rebuilding the exact scene, not to shame you, but to hand you back the thing you thought you and Apos lost forever. That and Apos, that's what happened on that beach. And it and Apos, that's the same offer that sound carried for Peter every single morning after. So here in Apos, that's what this story actually leaves you with. First, the truth. That rooster wasn't Apos. A random detail dropped into the story by accident. It was tied to a specific hour on a known clock, a specific word chosen on purpose, and a historical objection that, when you actually dig into the evidence, ends up strengthening the account instead of breaking it. Second, what it means for you. Jesus predicted Peter and Apos' failure before it happened, and he prayed for him before he failed, not after. That is not how people usually treat someone they and Apos about to lose faith in. That is how you treat someone you have already decided to bring back. And third, the part that should stay with you longest. The sound that exposed Peter and Apos' worst moment did not stay a symbol of shame. It became, for the rest of his life, a daily reminder that grace had already met him there before he even needed it. Every single morning, that same sound. Every single morning, the choice to remember which fire he was standing at, the one that broke him, or the one that rebuilt him. Which detail in this story hit you hardest? The rooster, the second fire, or the look Jesus gave him across that courtyard? Tell me below. Because here is the truth this story leaves behind. Jesus does not wait for you to clean yourself up before he plans your restoration. He plans it before you even fail. And whatever sound follows you, whatever memory replays on repeat, he is not finished writing what it means.